Hi, and welcome to our deck tech this week on my Naya Planeswalkers brew for post Shadows over Innistrad Standard. We have an interesting collection of really sweet mid-range cards. So,
Wow, really selling it.
yeah, they're all really awesome, and
And
they're
all
all in one
really
deck.
medium.
They're mid-range. It's a mid-range deck. It gets a little bit aggressive, but for the most part, you're grinding out a lot of value with a bunch of tokens and some sweet synergies. So the core of the deck is really the Thopter engine of Hangerback, Thopter Engineer, and PN Kieran, and then combined with the Planeswalkers that go really nicely with these cards, specifically Nissa. So as these cards generate a very wide board, you can play Nissa -2. Suddenly your Thopters are all really big and apply a lot of pressure that way. And then Arlen and Chandra can do similar things. You're not really minusing your Chandras that much in this deck because you have a bunch of 1/1s in play, but the additional cards or the additional pressure from the elemental tokens are welcome additions, and it's just a really powerful card to have at the top of the curve.
It just doesn't matter. Chandra's just so powerful.
Yeah, Chandra, great. Put it in your decks. Arlen Cord is an exciting new card from Shadows over Innistrad. 2 green-red Planeswalker. You can either
Are you gonna try to name off all the abilities? Because you're definitely gonna get one wrong.
Oh,
It just does so many things.
well, I don't actually know what the ultimate does.
Okay,
on the
then
flip
it just
side,
does so many
but I know,
things.
yeah, it's an emblem that your creatures have haste to do a lot of stuff. But you can make some wolves with it. Continue to go wide with your board. Gives you a little bit of additional removal on the werewolf side when you can use the lightning bolt ability, and the mini overrun ability on the werewolf side where you can add a loyalty to give all your creatures +1/+1 and trample is really nice with the wide boards this deck generates. So Arlen Cord, another welcome addition to the deck. Then Sylvan Advocate, which we've all seen over the last few months, incredibly powerful early drop and just
Scales well in the late game.
yeah,
Important for 2-drops in these kinds of decks.
exactly. Having your 2-drop be good on turn 6 is excellent. And then a couple things to tie the deck together with this one Den Protector, which is kind of arbitrary and maybe should be something else. But I like the idea of just being able to draw to this card to get anything back, a key removal spell, a key Planeswalker, anything like that. We have Oath of Nissa, which helps us dig towards getting all the right pieces in the right proportions so that you can find enough Anthem effects versus enough creatures versus enough lands. This card fixing your mana in the early game, I think, is going to be important, whether it's finding a white source for the removal spells that I'll get to that I've splashed, or having the ability to play Nissa without having maybe 2 green mana super early if you've drawn a bunch of your mountains and plains. I think Oath of Nissa is definitely a key card here, and another card that you can play early and not use it to not fall behind because you're smoothing your draw with it, but is also very good to draw late. Very important to have that in your mid-range decks so that they can top deck well going to turns 5 and as well as turns 10. So then the white splash that makes this deck Naya as opposed to green-red with the mana that we have available right now in Standard is a very risky proposition, but I think it's worth it here for 2 main reasons. The first is Angelic Purge, another new Shadows over Innistrad card. It's 2 colorless and a white sorcery. As an additional cost, you sacrifice a permanent. You can exile an artifact, enchantment, or creature. So it kills essentially anything, and this deck has a ton of spare permanents that you can sacrifice and not really lose anything. If you're in the late game, you can obviously sacrifice an extra land. If you're flooding, you can sacrifice an Oath of Nissa that's in play that isn't doing a lot, or this Oath of Chandra. And the big thing is you can sacrifice a Hangerback Walker. I think having ways to blow up your own Hangerback Walker is really important and generate a huge number of Thopters and maybe -2 a Nissa or +1 an Arlen on the following turn.
Or with Thopter Engineer in play, just that turn you hit them.
Yeah, or that turn. Excellent. So Angelic Purge, I think, is super important and just so much better than the removal options you have staying base red. I think Roast is pretty bad. We have one Oath of Chandra, but I don't want to play too many of these. And the one card that red-green versions of this deck get to play that I think is very good and may even belong in this one is Outnumber, because you generate a lot of creatures having a 1-mana answer to things. And so I could see Outnumber maybe replacing some number of commands or oaths, but for now I want to try out the white cards. Dromoka's Command, obviously just great card. We don't have a ton of big things to go along with it, which may make it worse, but I think having, again, more ways to blow up your Hangerback Walker, Sylvan Advocate becomes really big. And then even just trading away, like, a wolf token to kill something is perfectly reasonable, and it gives you another way to get some more counters on your one Den Protector to maybe get through that. I do like the one thing I do like about Den Protectors, it goes really nicely with Arlen Chord's +1 on the front side, where you give +2/+2 to a creature, and you can get through a stalled board with Den Protector plus Arlen that way.
It basically just assassinates a Planeswalker on site or whatever.
Yep. And then the other big thing that we get from playing white is in our mana base with getting a creature land in Needle Spires. I think having a creature land with Sylvan Advocate is really important. And with how light this white splash is in the deck, and I intentionally kept it very light to make the mana work, I think just the gain of Needle Spires is going to be worth the inconsistencies with adding more Enters the Battlefield tap lands and just a third color without a lot of the great fixing that we had in the previous format with fetch lands and battle lands. So looking closer at the mana base, we see the 4 Needle Spires, which are really important, and the 4 Evolving Wilds, just to get a 3-color land in the deck and help the mana out a lot. And the really interesting part is how to split up the new Shadowlands versus the Battlelands and where to find the right balance there. And what I did was I looked at how the deck was constructed, and I noted that I really didn't need white mana on the first 2 turns of the game, and so having a white Shadowland didn't make as much sense. And so I have Canopy Vistas as my white dual lands, and then I've maxed out on the green-red Shadowland because that is actually a land that I want to have come into play untapped on the first couple turns of the game. Whether I'm casting an Oath of Nissa, Oath of Chandra, I have Fiery Impulses in the sideboard, so having early green and red mana is actually can actually come up much more often than needing white mana that early.
I don't remember the first person that said it, but these lands, the Shadowlands, compare pretty favorably to like the Scars fast lands.
Yeah.
If you kind of think about them as like you want them to enter the battlefield untapped in the first 3 turns, but they're probably way less reliable past that point. I think that's a pretty good point of comparison.
Yeah, I agree. And in this deck, I think having staying in your base colors with your Shadowlands and then getting your splash out of your Battlelands is going to end up being the paradigm that we end up in. And whether or not this is the exact right balance, I'm not entirely sure. I think having 9 basics with 4 Battlelands that can help your game trails come into play untapped, or having 9 basics and 4 Evolving Wilds to help your 4 Battlelands enter the battlefield untapped. The numbers, they make sense to me, but it's much less a science and much more of an art.
It's really difficult to tell at this point.
And sort of figuring it out. So hopefully the mana base works out. That's definitely something I want to look at, and it's one of the reasons I'm playing this deck this week is to see how the a 3-color mana base could work in the upcoming standard format, because a lot of people are focusing more on 2-color decks or 1-color colorless decks so that they can have the rock solid mana that we're used to. Mm-hmm. And if we can find the correct balance and get a 2.5, maybe even full 3-color deck to work, then you're obviously going to get a huge increase in the power level of the cards that are available to you, and that could put your deck over the top.
I generally agree, but I don't actually think it's going to happen. But I'm optimistic for you.
Yeah, Michael is skeptical but optimistic.
These 3-color decks, they look rough.
Yeah, they haven't been great so far in testing, but I think this one is disciplined enough in how light the splash is, and the cards are powerful enough within the context of the shell that I'm working in that it should work. So this is the main deck. Come back in just a minute and check us out for the sideboard. Welcome back here for the sideboard of Naya Planeswalkers, and it is a fairly typical mid-range sideboard. We've got a good collection of removal spells so that we can side into a deck that matches up better against our opponent's threats. The Fiery Impulses, obviously, for fast, aggressive decks, and then a couple new options from Shadows over Innistrad. We have Clip Wings, which is sort of the new Plummet. And
this card is great.
Yeah, matches up very well against Dragonlord Ojutai, can kill an Avacyn at instant speed, which is very important. And I think really just hitting those 2 is probably enough, and then it also hits a Dragonlord Atarka against ramp decks. So I think this card is going to be a staple and just a very good Plummet variant. There's not too much that's very complicated going on with it, but very good card. You should keep this in mind for your decks.
Kills a transform Westvale Abbey.
Yeah, Ormondal, Profane Prince, which is another. That card has like 37 abilities, so I don't even know what kills it.
I think it's going to be quite relevant.
Yeah. And then Declaration in Stone, which I think is a great removal spell from Shadows, and one that
The best removal spell in Shadows.
the best
I'll
one.
just go ahead and say it.
Okay,
It is the best
number
removal
one.
spell.
So having this as just an extra removal spell against opposing Hangerback Walkers, just against large creatures. I didn't have a lot of slots left, so being able to have a card that kills literally anything.
Yeah.
Secure the Waste, it handles all the tokens at
Yep.
once. Very nice. If you're playing mirror matches, you can handle a bunch of Thopters at once, maybe the Mono Red Eldrazi deck. Card is...
I do want to note, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Critically, a difference between this card and like we've seen things with similar effects like Maelstrom Pulse and Detention Sphere. It only hits your opponent's copies of the cards.
Yes. So perfect when you're playing mirror matches. You don't have to get in these awkward states where it blows up part of your board as well as theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Card is just great. And then some more interesting options. Evolutionary Leap is my anti-control card of choice. When we're generating a bunch of expendable creatures, this card is just great. We have a lot of mana going long in a mid-range deck, and just being able to find more copies of your Hangerback Walkers, more copies of your Sylvan Advocates, more Pia and Kirans.
One Den Protector.
Yes, the one Den Protector. We need to find it every game. And so even in a deck that doesn't have a lot of creatures, because we have a decent number of Planeswalkers, I think this card's going to put in a lot of work, and having another way to blow up our Hangerback Walkers. Then the cards in this third row are sort of my anti-ramp plan, where I have Act of Treason that can take an Atarka or an Ulamog after they cast it, and hopefully kill them with it, but if not kill them, deal a whole big chunk of damage and set them up to be very close to dead. And then Castigator is a card that's going to help us apply a lot of pressure very quickly against ramp decks and control decks that aren't really attacking you or pressuring your life total as much, so the downside of the Castigator doubling their damage sources isn't really realized. When they're not doing that, this card, just 4 mana, 4 power flying haste, is an excellent rate and is going to be the best option for applying pressure. So I think this is a card you're going to see in a lot of sideboards
I think
in the next few
it's
months.
probably the best red sideboard card we've seen in really a long time.
Yeah. Just a very powerful, good sideboard card. So we have a full 3 copies here, or close to full.
A full 3 copies.
Full 3. I can never put 4 copies of anything in my sideboard. I don't know if you've ever seen me build a sideboard. Just never has 4 of anything.
The full 3.
The full 3. It never goes more than that. And then my little bit of spice if I'm playing against an opposing mid-range deck where we're just sort of battling on board, I want to go over the top a little, is my Dragonlord Atarka. Maybe I can find it with Evolutionary Leap. That would be fun. But just a very powerful card for when I need a little bit of extra oomph in a matchup. So here's my Naya Planeswalker sideboard. I'm playing against this black-white control.
Black-white control, baby.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Come back for the games.